this 50th thousand history show. This show will go into the history books as a landmark show in my book. First show at 50K. Thank you all. I deeply appreciate it. By the way, Sarah Bills is going to be showing pretty soon. She will be here shortly. We have a damn good crowd today. Yeah, she'll be here in 15 minutes, give or take. To go back to the story that we were talking about before, Europe is losing its mind. Europe is losing its mind. And I'll cut this as a video. They are deeply, deeply delusional. So Witkoff and Rubio go to Paris. Sounds like a bad joke, right? Witkoff and Rubio go to Paris. Now, Witkoff is, again, fascinating to me. Like, this was the point that I was disagreeing with Lath on, right? Because Lath was like, the government is going to function in a particular way. I was like, yeah, but if you want that, you don't send Witkoff. He sent Witkoff, Israel, for that fake deal. Russia, to talk to Putin like 3 times. Oman, once, and they're going back again for negotiations. And now to Paris with Rubio to talk to the Europeans, to tell them of peace talks. Effectively, okay, you're not included in these peace talks. However, we will tell you and give you a briefing on what's happening. Europe, from their point, is trying to convince them this is a bad idea and you need to be more of a hard ass with the Russians. Now, this is why I say they are deeply, deeply delusional. Deeply delusional. Right here, this part in part because Russia is dominating on the battlefield. Every day they're expanding on a 2,000-kilometer front. They are refilling their ranks. They will have 1 million men military at a certain point. And there is nothing Ukraine can do to stop it. Ukraine cannot fill their ranks. They were talking about putting women in the battlefield. They tried to scam kids to go into the battlefield. I'm talking about 18-year-olds effectively saying, hey, we'll give you a lot of money, knowing full well that those kids most likely wouldn't last a week. And yet they were doing it. And so you have one military that is falling apart, losing ground, and at some point will collapse. The Russians know if we keep going, they will collapse. And they are now gearing up for an offensive. They have pushed the Ukrainians back out of Kursk. I think there might be one hamlet. And if you remember what the Ukrainians were saying, well, the reason we have to hold on to this patch of land is not just negotiations. It is also that if we run, they're going to chase us. So if we leave, they will invade Sumy and keep going. Well, they've already invaded Sumy. So not only have you been pushed out forcibly, so Sumy has now been effectively taken, or at the very least invaded. Not to mention the other parts of the front. It is clear as day that they have been saving up missiles and they are gearing up for an offensive. And an argument can be made now that since the Ukrainian military can't necessarily stop them as is, that there already may be an offensive. It is just picking up speed as it goes. They are close to Kiev, or at the very least the direction they're going will take them close to Kiev. It is unclear whether Russia is going to try to take the capital, but I'm giving you context of what is happening on the battlefield. They're lacking air defense. Donald Trump has not, let's say, improved their situation because of what they call a drawdown authority, that basically there's a patch of money that Joe Biden gave them that is running out, that Trump most likely will not replenish. So from a funding standpoint, they most likely will not get any additional money from Trump on this. They will collapse. Full stop. That is the context to which we're talking about. In this context, the U.S. is like, let's negotiate. And Donald Trump is like, we need a deal. He sends Witkoff to talk to Putin. He talks to Putin. Witkoff comes back and scares the shit out of the Europeans. Scares the living shit out of the Europeans. He comes back and goes on a talk show and says, this is not what Europe wants to hear. And by the way, Witkoff who is Trump's guy. And I emphatically say that. And I emphatically say that because Trump decided, I don't trust the State Department. I don't trust Rubio. I don't trust Witkoff. I don't trust any of these people. And because I don't trust the State Department with Rubio in it, these people are neocons, that is not my vision. Meaning they are not functioning with the vision to which I want to see the world and I want to operate. And the last time I was in office, I was subverted from what I wanted to accomplish. Yes, it was the Russiagate stuff, but people like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, these people were not of my mind in the way that I'm looking at this. So I am going to reach all the way out to somebody who has nothing to do with politics, no experience in this at all, but has my vision of what I want, and it's not going to fuck me over in regards to negotiations. He's a realist, and I'm going to sit realist to talk to these people to figure out how do we make a deal. Because I said I was going to end the war. I want to accomplish that objective of ending the war. But I want to end it on terms that are favorable to me. I don't want to look bad. I want to get a deal. That's what I want. I'm sitting Witkoff. Witkoff goes to Putin. And I would guarantee you that Putin told him, these 4 regions are part of our constitution. Full stop. There's no deal on that. NATO is non-negotiable. There's no changing that. And that government needs to change. I can make no deal with Zelensky. He's illegitimate. Any deal that is made with Zelensky, the next person who comes in office can say, well, that guy had declared martial law and he stayed over his term, so he wasn't the legitimate president at the time, so I don't have to accept this deal. And so those things are non-negotiable. Trump already hates Zelensky. And there's talk behind the scenes that the Russians and the Americans are thinking of a government that both can effectively agree upon. Because again, up to 2008, I think Bucharest Summit, Ukraine was supposed to be neutral. You touch it, now we're fighting over it. Same thing to Taiwan. Don't touch it. Nobody is going to fight over it. If you touch it, we got to fight over it. If you put a gun in space, you got to put a gun in space. Same thing. So Witkoff goes, Putin tells him, these are my red lines. And he comes back to Trump. And on some level, Witkoff is like, if you want to end the war, you got to go for these regions. This is the only way to end the war. The Russians, I would imagine, Trump knows, has assessments. Ukraine will collapse at a certain point. It doesn't matter if we get a deal or not. If they keep going, they're going to drop. So you need to make a deal. And if you make a deal, those regions need to be part of the deal. Witkoff goes into Hannity and listen to what he says. Because the deal that they're talking about making is less about Ukraine, really. Because that's a settled issue, if that makes sense. Short of some kind of security guarantees or something like that, Witkoff's like, give up the regions. And Witkoff has been getting a lot of attacks coming out of Europe, especially coming out of Zelensky, who's been trashing him, and coming out of the neocons in the US. And yet, he's still Trump's guy. Trump still uses him in all of these cases, regardless of the criticism he gets. And he gets the backing of Rubio, apparently, also. So despite the criticism from Trump's Twitter, that's my guy. That guy's going with my vision. Full stop. He's a realist. That's what I want. I don't want these neocons. I want that guy. So regardless of the attacks, he still puts his faith in Witkoff. Witkoff goes on Hannity and says this, which every European lunatic, every whack job that's in Europe that wants to keep a war going, that is lost, that they will collapse on, their ass puckered when they heard him say this.
I think you used a very good word there, Sean, emerging. I do. This is the 3rd meeting I've had with him. This last meeting lasted close to 5 hours. We had 2 of his key advisors in the room at the time, Ushakov and Kirill Dmitriev. And it was a compelling meeting. And towards the end, we actually came up with, and I'm going to say finally, but I don't mean it in the way that we were waiting. I mean it in the way that it took a while for us to get to this place. What Putin's request is to have a permanent peace here. So beyond a ceasefire, we got an answer to that.
Okay, and will the deal include things that maybe are out of the box that people aren't thinking about now? I would imagine Vladimir Putin probably would want to be in business with the U.S. and with Europe. Is that a potential that could come out of this?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, this peace deal is about these so-called 5 territories, but there's so much more to it. There's security protocols. There's no NATO, Article 5. I mean, it's just, a lot of detail attached to it. It's a complicated situation, rooted in some real problematic things happening between the two countries, and I think we might be on the verge of something that would be very, very important for the world at large. On top of that, I believe there's a possibility to reshape the Russian-United States relationship through some very compelling commercial opportunities that I think give real stability to the region too.
A redefinition of the relationship between Russia and the United States using business interests to create economic ties that inherently, because of those economic ties, creates peace. And not just peace, stability for the region, basically for Europe. The US and Russia come into some kind of terms to reshape the world in global political order. No more Cold War stuff. The US and Russia working together. Okay, that's astonishing, right? And if you are Kalis, if you're Mark Rutte, if you are those lunatics in Macron, who's going to be out of office soon, or for that matter, Starmer, who's completely hated, that is not what you want to hear. What you just heard was, oh my God, the US is going to work with the Russians to cut an economic deal. And in the context of that economic deal, create stability in Europe that doesn't include Europe. That's amazing. That is not what they want to hear. that is terrifying to them. And they are freaking out. And they're freaking out in a very particular way that is completely delusional. Germany, all of those countries are economically strapped. Germany is being deindustrialized because of the war, meaning Europe has taken an economic hit because of the war. The amount of money that Europe has to pay for weapons, much of which is coming to the United States. The amount of money they've had to pay for oil and gas, much of which is coming to the United States. You have capital flight out of Europe into the United States that has made Europe poor. And yet, they're still like, we need to get billions somehow to Ukraine. We need to create a European military. We need to spend $1 trillion on it. Where are you getting the money to do that? How are you doing that? And even when you put that in a context, a box of itself, the military in Ukraine is going to collapse. It doesn't matter what you do. You've already shot your load. You've given billions. You've given all of your weapon stores. You've done it all already. You no longer have those weapons. You no longer have that money. You make it out of thin air like the U.S. did, but none of it that you did has changed the context on the ground. The military will collapse. Give it time. It may take 2 months, it may take 5 months. It will collapse. So all of this talk about we must continue to help Ukraine is a fool's errand. And you don't have the money to do it when the United States walks, especially when the U.S. is like, we're done. So the deal that Trump is trying to make is essentially, all right, I want to wrap this up. This is not my war. This is Joe Biden's war. If a deal is there to be had, I want to have a deal. And Russia, being smart in the way that they played it, sent a businessman to the U.S. to talk to Trump about business. When Witkoff goes, he acknowledges, okay, these territories are necessary for a deal, but what else is there that we can do together as we work together? I mean, after all, most of the prosperous land in Ukraine, Russia now holds. It is part of their constitution. So if we need to make a deal, it's better to make a deal with Russia because there's a lot more that we can get out of it in regards to deal as opposed to rump state Ukraine that we don't even know is going to exist after the fact and is deeply, deeply in debt, has no money, and is busted. So when they're looking at that, Europe is like, holy shit, that's a problem. We need to stop that, despite the fact that they're going to collapse on the ground. So as they hear Witkoff makes these statements, Witkoff, Rubio, goes to France in order to have a conversation with the coalitions of the willing. Starmer's there, I think France is there. And Ukraine just so happens to show up out of the blue because they want to give their take on things. I would wager to you they were invited by the Europeans, but whatever. Witkoff, Rubio, sounds like a bad sitcom, goes to Paris. And again, I want to point out, he sends Witkoff. Rubio, on some level, is sidelined, even though Rubio is there. They have a conversation with them, and they talk to the Europeans. And in this conversation with the Europeans, they effectively tell them, okay, look, this is what we've been doing. We're trying to get a deal. We're trying to get peace. We're trying to do all of that stuff. And for Europe's part, they're like, you shouldn't do that. We don't want you to do that. We want you to be tougher on the Russians. Okay, how? How? Now, Kellogg made this plan about putting in peacekeepers. Okay, well, that means the war continues. It doesn't stop. That's not what Trump wants. He wants the war to end. But Rubio says something else. He says, if we can't get a deal, we need to walk. We need to walk. Okay, I don't want to play the commercial. Right here. If it is not possible to end the war in Ukraine, the United States needs to abandon its efforts within days and move on. According to Marco Rubio, we need to determine very quickly now, I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable. He told reporters before departing to Paris, where he held high-level talks with Europeans and Ukrainian officials. We need to figure out whether we can end this now. Not in a few days, not in weeks, not in months, now. And if we can't, we need to call this a day and abandon this fool's errand and just walk. Okay, so all of that talk before about we're going to pass more sanctions. We're going to do something. Okay, that talk seems fallen by the wayside and is now at, we'll call it quits and just leave. We'll take the Steve Bannon approach. Walk the fuck away. Hard. Don't even do an investigation. Just walk. Just go. Just leave it. And a lot of people, especially in MAGA, thought that's what Trump should have did in the first place on day one. Done. We're out. Figure this shit out. But Trump, being Trump, wants a deal. He wants to stand there with Putin, shaking hands in Moscow, or Putin here, and they go, yes, look at the deal that we got. Now, fact of the matter is, as Witkoff say, it's complicated. And there's a lot of stuff that they need to figure out. But the things that they don't probably need to figure out is those territories, no NATO for Ukraine. So what Europe has decided to do is to try to keep the conflict going, but do it in a very particular way. So in the same way with the Ukrainians are out there pleading their case or whatever, and the French and the Brits are trying, hey, we don't want you to do this. We want to put troops in. We want you to back us and all this other stuff. And Trump's like, look, I'm not doing that. You're not getting security guarantees for me where you're going to fight a war with the United States. And Europe, again, no, we're not doing that. So what they say is they come up with a separate plan, a parallel track. So you have the negotiations that are taking place with Trump and Russia. And Europe is like, okay, since we're not included in those negotiations, we will work with Zelensky. So we will pat Zelensky on the head when Trump makes him feel bad. We will have conversations about what we can do as a coalition of the willing. And you get stories that come out like this. NATO countries sending troops into Ukraine for practice, to learn from the war. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. And it's Denmark, of all places. We are about to take Greenland from Denmark, and they can't do anything about it militarily, but they fully believe that they should be able to go into Ukraine. I will tell you that right off the bat, as the Russians said, they are legitimate targets. And I keep nailing home this point because I haven't heard people point it out that over and over again, when Russia is hitting these sites, some of these sites have NATO troops. When they hit that restaurant, it was a meeting place where NATO was meeting with Ukrainians using human shields in regards to the restaurant. Russia hit it. And when they were carrying them out to the hospital, hit it again. Why? They make it a point. We will hunt you down and we will kill you. That's what we would do. We told you, if you come in here, you're legitimate targets, you will die. Full stop. We don't care where you are. We can hit you anywhere in Ukraine, and we will do so. You will die. That is the point. That is the context. When you see the military X thing in Sumi, again, bam, we don't care that you're using human shields in this case. You're going to die. We're going to hit you. We're going to find you. You're going to die. And I think at the other site where they hit, where again, NATO targets. When Rutt was in Odessa, in fact, I even have the video, him sitting in Odessa, and he makes a point of, well, when there's a peace deal, and after that peace deal, we will revisit this issue of NATO in Ukraine. Now, what he knows or accepts, we can't stop this peace deal between the U.S. and Ukraine, if indeed they come up with one. However, the moment that deal is signed, then we will put NATO troops, or we will bring Ukraine into NATO. We will revisit this conversation. Okay, well, he knows, as he says that means the war continues. This is not a situation where Russia accepts, how can we sign a peace deal like Minsk, and then you go back on? We're not doing that. That's not. War continues. If that's what's happening right now, the war continues. Then you get Starmer, Macron, and this coalition of the willing, effectively saying, okay, we're going to put troops, let's say in Romania, and then go into Odessa. Again, what does that mean? The war continues. So you have Donald Trump having this conversation, trying to get a deal, some kind of financial entanglements with Russia, with Witkoff making these really big ideas about this reevaluation of the relationship between the United States and Russia, which I'm here for that. I want that. I don't want us to be at odds. I don't want to be at odds with any country, right? But then you have Europe doing every and anything in their power in a parallel track to not let it happen, and doing it in a very particular way about making threats, about putting troops in Ukraine, knowing full well that the U.S. is not going to be a backstop, and on some level believing that when those troops are hit and those people die, that the U.S. will somehow get involved, as opposed to Trump saying, I told you shouldn't went in. It could be a bluff, or they could be serious. If it's a bluff specifically for the point of killing the negotiations. That's the entire point. Russia cannot make a deal if Donald Trump can't get his vassal state in line, and if they can't make an ironclad agreement that there is no NATO. Full stop. This is not something we revisit in 20 years. There is no NATO. Full stop. And ideally, something else Witkoff said that should be obvious, peaceful relations with its neighbors. It's not like they wanted to go in. They have this deeply dishonest take on how all of this started and the progression of this. This notion of, Ukraine could be part of NATO in 2008 that created all these divisions within the country. William Burns pointing out, net means net. You are going to provoke a civil war by offering NATO to Ukraine, a country that's supposed to be neutral, that's on the Russian border, a civil war that Russia would have to get involved in, that they don't want to get involved in. You get the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, Yanukovych in 2014. Again, overtly provocative, right? Putin doesn't entirely get engaged. They take the Crimea. They flip out. 90% or more of the Crimeans chose to go to Russia because most of those people are Russian. Then you get the U.S. pushing them to bomb Donetsk. You're in a civil war. And the civil war was directly provoked by you overthrowing the government. If Donald Trump takes the country when Biden won, and California says, fuck it, we're out. Fifth largest economy in the world. If we're a country, we're out. We're not doing this. The country has just been overthrown. And Trump starts bombing California. Okay, that's pretty wild. But you can see where California is coming from when in their minds, this is no longer America because America has been overthrown. Same difference. With the catch being, you have a fascist government that has just taken power with a band of Nazis that have a huge amount of control in that government that we provoked, we put in, we were giving cookies to, we were giving directions to, we were giving money to do exactly what they did. The CIA was in it for decades. The other regions that we're out, we voted to leave. And just like William Burns said, Russia gets involved. Russia got involved in the Civil War, just like the US was involved in the Civil War. But they never talk about it in the context of the US is fighting Russia. They talk about it as Russia's fighting Ukraine, which on some level it is. But again, they're fighting with the Civil War, with the other opposition's part of that, of East Ukraine. They're deeply dishonest in the way that they explain it. If you explain it that way, okay, well, that makes more sense. That's more sensible. That's not the Russians are just evil. It just wants to take over all of Ukraine. It's these 4 regions are ours. We're going to take these regions. These people are Russian speakers. They're ethnic Russians. They prefer to be part of Russia, considering what just took place. Fair enough. We don't need all of Ukraine, but we will take it. And then the war expands because now all of NATO is involved. It's been inflamed. And the special military operation, what started off as smaller, expands in scope to we might need to take it all. No more space. In which case, again, Europe will have a collective shit fit at that point. But again, they are the ones that want to keep fighting until the military collapses. You have your lunatic Zelensky that is in office, that doesn't want to give up power, that has declared martial law again in order to make himself a king. And you even have people in Ukraine complain. I think Poroshenko is complaining, saying, this martial law is outlandish. We need an election. That asshole needs to be voted out. It's astonishing. That's all. Like, it's a lot of shit that's going on at the exact same time. And so if you could put an end to that, something that never should have taken place in the first place, it is a stupid war. But you're talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe 800,000 dead Ukrainians, maybe 100, 200,000 dead Russians as a result of a war that should have never taken place, that we entirely pushed and egged on, knowing full well what was going to happen, with the idea being for Europe, we are going to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, with Joe Biden arm in arm with them doing so. They lost. They will collapse. Like Captain America would say, the Russians will say, we could do this all year. So if Rubio is like, we're going to leave, that means they collapse. Full stop. And Rubio knows it when he says it. And he knows that they know what it means when he says it. So Trump wants his deal. Whether he gets it or not, who knows? Europe is doing any and everything in their power to prevent him from getting that deal. He knows, the Russian knows, that if Europe will do that, then there can be no deal. The war has to continue. Europe is doing everything in their power to put their thumb in Trump's eye. Zelensky has been wilding out. For his side, he has been screaming bloody murder at Vance, at Witkoff, and on some level, even at Trump, effectively pointing out, you didn't talk to us about this. Like, how are you negotiating over lands that belong to us? Now, Zelensky has already said we don't have the power to take those lands back. Okay, fair enough. You don't have the power to take the lands back. And let's be clear, he is not long for this office and may not be long for this world if he does not end up in a prison cell, which may be part of the reason why he's fighting so hard to stay in this. And let's be very clear also, it's not like you are a sovereign country. I've had this conversation, I think, with John. When the Istanbul agreements came up, or for that matter, even the Minsk agreements, Ukraine blew them off. They blew them off because Europe and the United States said, we don't care about those agreements. Agreements that were designed to end the conflict and prevent a war were used in order to build up a massive military, the largest military in Europe. Don't take my word for it. Angela Merkel even points out, we lied. We tricked Putin. Hollande says something, we lied. We had no intention of fulfilling the obligations of the Minsk agreements. And even Boris Johnson that clown of a human being, that degenerate, came out and said there was no way Zelensky could have signed a deal. They would put a bullet in his head if he did so. So they came up with an agreement just to trick the Russians to give Ukraine time to build up a military, the largest in Europe. That's the context. That's the reality of events. Meaning everything I just said is true. And when you say it that way, it makes sense. But the media never says it that way. They never explain it. They give the snapshot. Russia invaded. They're the bad guys. Okay, well, I mean, how many countries have we invaded? How many countries have we knocked over? You don't even point out that we knocked over the government that inspired all of this stuff. So I don't know if Trump is going to get his deal. I don't know if Europe is going to be stupid enough to go it alone and put in troops. I'm almost certain that they're not getting $1 trillion to build this massive European military. It is clear that the transatlantic relationship between Trump and Europe, if not broken, is completely fractured. Trump is talking about pulling troops out of Europe. There's that. And I pointed out Zelensky. Zelensky has been attacking Trump and Witkoff. He is not a happy camper right now. And this is, where is it? Right here. This is him. He believes, I strongly suspect, that the Europeans will be able to somehow support Ukraine in this, and that they can take up the mantle for whatever the United States was putting out. I think he is deeply, deeply insane if he thinks that. We were the driving force. We were giving them the weapons or selling them the weapons. We were picking the targets. We were using our own intelligence in order to do that stuff. If we stop, they fail faster. All of this posturing and talking, attacking Vance and attacking Witkoff as being Russian stooges. Okay, fair enough. This explains on some level the reason that Donald Trump was so brutal when he was referring to Zelensky and when he was referring to Joe Biden, et cetera, et cetera. Effectively, this is Joe Biden's war. This is not my war. And to back up what Rubio was saying, Donald Trump himself came out and said, this is not my war. This is not my war. Joe Biden did this. So right here, this is Biden's war. Now, I kept saying that Trump could use that and just walk. And maybe should have used it in the beginning and just walked. But he wanted his big, beautiful deal. Right here. This is Trump.
I made a mistake. I believe it was. Look, you're going to ask them. This is Biden's war. This is not my war. I've been here for a very short period of time. This is a war that was under Biden. He gave him billions and billions of dollars. He should have never allowed, if he had any brain, which he didn't have and doesn't have, and now it's being proven, he wouldn't have allowed that war to start. I would have absolutely not. That war would never have taken place. But remember this. This is Biden.
And Trump might be right. Meaning, it took U.S. will to push it. When Putin was standing out there like a preacher, begging people to come to Jesus. I don't know if you've ever been to a Black Baptist church. There used to be a preacher, A. Lincoln James, when he used to preach, he used to sweat heavily. Like he was the hardest preacher I've ever seen in my life. It's like he was trying to save every soul like that he could. And it just, every ounce of energy in his body was trying to save souls. Putin was begging them, we need a new security architecture of Europe. Please make a deal with me. And he put out his own plan. How about this? And they said, you don't get security guarantees. You don't get to dictate the security of Russia and surrounding countries. You don't get to dictate who's going to be part of NATO. None of this is things that you get to dictate. We don't need to negotiate with you. And I strongly suspect a part of that is because freedom is taken at the barrel of a gun. And when the Soviet Union fell, it gave this perception, especially during the Yeltsin years, that Russia was, as Obama said, a gas can masquerading as a country. Well, it took, 600, 800,000 dead Ukrainians to show that that wasn't true and to gain respect in a way that scared the shit out of Europe, as they should be, if indeed they're going to invade. Russia wasn't a threat. I would argue it's not a threat now. I would even argue, as Witkoff said, obviously they want peaceful relations with their neighbor. But if you are expanding military to their border, what are they supposed to do? What would we do? If, the Warsaw Pact countries connected with Mexico and they overthrew the government of Mexico and they put in a United States phobic government that hated our guts. And they had CIA people, they had built up a military. This stuff was happening on that border. Do we honestly believe that the perspective of the president would be, they can do whatever they want? They're an independent country. But however they want to live their life, it's fair game. Or do you think we would have gave them some freedom? I present to you that we would have gave them freedom. Now, if we could see it in that context, why are we so ideologically blind that you can't see it from their perspective? This is kind of go back to the JFK speech, right? I guess my point is, I want Trump to get that deal. I don't know if Trump could get that deal. And he would have to somehow, get rid of Zelensky. You may be able to do that with political pressure internally in Ukraine, buy somebody off. Why not? Pay somebody to knock them off. Why not? You have CIA, all of these other goons that are effectively there. 600,000 people have been killed. Why does Zelensky matter? He's been head of it. And on some level, you would even have to get Europe in line. How do you do that? The transatlantic relationship has been broken. So how do you get your vassals in line when you have Vance out there saying, we're sick of you being vassals? You kind of need them to be vassals to get them in line. It's a fascinating dilemma that I don't really, I don't know how this works out. The fact that Rubio is now echoing, we will just walk, is amazing. That is the first time I've heard that uttered. Up to this point, we're going to pass sanctions. We're going to give them more weapons. We're going to give them more money. We're going to do all this stuff. Rubio is not saying we're going to walk on his own. He's speaking for the president. We'll call it a day. We go to other concerns, if that's what we need to do. You can figure it out on your own. Fight the Russians on your own if you want to. We're out. That's amazing. And that's a shot across the bow. Not just to Ukraine, in one sense. I guess for the mineral deal, where Trump is saying, you owe me $100 billion. But also to Europe, who has no capacity to do that. The three, people in the British Army and the tank that's missing a wheel, and the four Sacre Bleu fighters in the French army. Good luck fighting that army that has been killing and dying for 3 years and has gotten battle hardened in modern warfare. Not the last war, the current modern warfare. You can't do it. You'd lose. Trump knows it. Rubio knows it. Witkoff knows it. That's where we're at. That is the context. That is our world in regards to the war. It is a fascinating dynamic that is taking place in Europe. They are losing their minds, and losing their minds over ghosts, because it's like a stab in the back myth in a weird way. They've come up with rhetorical positions that they've hardened and that they've used. And we did this under Joe Biden, right? Rhetorical positions that you've hardened and that you've come up with, that you have lived in. And then Trump comes along and says, none of this stuff is true. And Europe is like, no, it is. It really is. It really is true. And your societies have given hundreds of billions of dollars, depriving your own citizens of things, and even making the argument, we need to have less social services in order to support Ukraine. That's amazing. That's amazing. You get, what's her name, in Germany, foreign minister, Baerbock, who's like, I don't care what Germans want. We've got to keep doing this. That's amazing. All of these things are amazing. This is what's happening. And so, oh, what happened? She didn't show up. Okay. Maybe something came up. No, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. So this is our world. This is our world in context. This is what is happening in regards to the war. And I have no idea how it will turn out. It is absolutely